Hello and welcome back to Geek and Speak, the Geek and Seek podcast. Today, we are continuing, as my cat is scratching the wall behind me, we are continuing our conversations about color combinations. A few weeks ago, we did one talking about the two color pairs, ranking them based on our personal preference. And then an episode after that, I believe, we were talking about just 4 color decks in general. Today, we are going to be talking about 3 color combinations. We're not going to be ranking them. We're not going to have like a huge broad discussion of them overall, because I think in 3 colors, there's still a little bit of identity to be had. So we're going to break down each of the 10 3-color combinations, talk about the strengths and weaknesses and what we like and don't like about them. So joining me today is Jason. Jason, how's it going, man?
Going pretty good. Having a pretty good week. How about yourself?
Good, good. And then Mr. Preston, how are you?
I am doing pretty good myself.
Sweet. That's what I like to hear. So before we jump into it, a reminder that if you'd like to support Geek and Seek, if you like our podcast, our gameplay, the other things that we have going on behind the scenes here, you can subscribe to us on Patreon. And if you're in Patreon, you also get to hop in our Discord where you can hang out, talk magic, see a lot of our videos early. And then if you can't support us financially, that's fine. You can also like, comments, share, subscribe, all the stuff that helps us with the algorithm, including going back and watching some of our old videos that maybe you haven't seen. So let's go ahead and get into this episode. But now that the podcast is weekly now, we are allowed to do news sections again. So because by the time they're coming out, it's not that old of news. So starting February 9th, we are getting the release of Murders at Karlov Manor, the next standard legal set. And we will be doing next week's episode, we're going to be talking about each of our top 5 favorite cards from the set. So make sure you're subscribed. Come back for that one when it comes out. But today, we're not going to be talking about very many of the specific new cards, but we did want to highlight some of the new mechanics. Starting with the first mechanic, we have Cloak, which is kind of like upgraded. It's kind of like upgraded Manifest, if you guys remember that mechanic, where you exile the top card of your library. It's a 2/2, and then you can turn it face up for its mana cost if it's a creature. It's kind of like that. So we're going to be looking at, as an example of the new mechanic Cloak, Xanathar Evolved Enigma. So for 2 green blue, it's a Simic Elf Ooze Wizard 3/4. At the beginning of combat on your turn, choose 1. Cloak a card from your hand, which means you put it onto the battlefield face down as a 2/2 creature with Ward 2. And then you can turn it up at any time for its mana cost if it's a creature. And then the other mode that you can choose is put a +1/+1 counter on each colorless creature you control. I don't want to spend too much time dissecting this card specifically. Obviously, it could be a pretty interesting commander card if you're just trying to cheat in big creatures or something like that. It's basically Manifest, except now the 2/2 has Ward 2, which means that now you're, like in Standard, your cut down instead of 1 mana is now 3 mana. So the next mechanic is also a similar take on a mechanic we already have. This we're going to look at Axebane Ferox as the example card. So this is Collect Evidence X. All right. So this card is a 4/4 with Death Touch and Haste. And Ward collects Evidence 4. So whenever this creature becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, counter it unless that player exiles cards with total mana value 4 or greater from their graveyard. And there's a lot of different ways that Collect Evidence works in this set. Like you can use it to power up your own spells. As in this example, you can make it so that you're protecting your own stuff. But basically, it's kind of like a new version of Delve, where you're exiling stuff from your graveyard to pay a cost. Except now with Collect Evidence, you're caring about not how many cards you're exiling, but what the mana value of those cards is. All right, so we got 2 more mechanics before we jump into the main topic. So this next one is Suspected. So we'll look at Agris Kos as an example. So it's a legendary spirit detective with double strike and vigilance. And then whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, choose up to 1 target creature. If it's suspected, exile it. Otherwise, suspect it. A suspected creature has menace and it can't block. So I think in Commander, this is going to be pretty good. It's going to help incentivize attacking because, like, why hold it back as a blocker if it can't block? And then giving it Menace is also going to help chip in for some damage. So the last mechanic that we're going to touch on from the new set before we jump into our main topic are cases, which is a new enchantment subtype. As an example, we'll look at Case of the Locked Hothouse. So they start off with a static ability that happens that's active as soon as it hits the battlefield. Then there's a second section that says, if you do this thing, you get the next part. And then the last part is solved. So, for an example, Case of the Locked Hothouse, you may play an additional land on each of your turns. And then in order to solve it, you have to control 7 or more lands. And then at the next end step, if you have solved it, if you have reached that requirement, you get the last ability, which says you may look at the top card of your library anytime, Jason, for you, and you may play lands and cast creatures and enchantment spells from the top of your library. So first of all, this is a pretty neat commander card. I think a lot of green decks are going to like this card. I actually was a little annoyed by it because it's not super intuitive, because it structure-wise kind of looks like classes, it kind of looks like sagas, and it's not. That's not really how it works. But I feel like there's some really cool design, and I've liked a lot of the cases I've seen. So let us hop into our main topic, where we're going to be talking about the 10 3-color combinations. Starting off, we have Esper. So this is the black, blue, white color combination. I should also preface that I don't remember which are shards and which are wedges. So forgive me, I'm not a nerd. And but I will say that Esper is like maybe my favorite color combination because it's kind of control-y. You're drawing a lot of cards, but you're blowing stuff up, and it's got some cool stuff. So if we're looking at the, top Esper commanders on EDH Rec, number one's a Layla, which is kind of fairy tribal, but it's also artifact and enchantment, so it's pretty flexible commander. You have Allura, which is life gain. Preston, that's up your alley. White and black are life gain. You have card draw matter stuff like Queza, which is one of my personal favorite decks. There's a couple of other tribal decks. There's some artifact decks. There's a couple token decks. There's some reanimator decks. It's typically the control colors, but it's pretty dang sweet. So yeah, like I said, Esper is maybe my favorite color combination. But what do you guys think about Esper? And what do you think are some of the strengths and weaknesses of the color combination?
Well, obviously, we got to point out how strong each of the colors are individually.
Yeah.
The strongest of the three, I would say, is black, and then blue, and then white. And it's close. White might be better than blue.
Well, so I think green's the best in Commander, probably. At least at the more casual, like 6 to 8 power level. And then blue and black is probably tied for second. And white is the best support color, though.
Yes, see, that's the thing. I think, okay, personally, I think black is a better color than blue is. I think it's a stronger color. Yeah, blue's got the counter spells and can stop you, but black gets out of control so quickly. I mean, all you need is just one turn where you can activate your Cabal coffers and you're going to have a good time. But
in white, you have some land tutors, so you can get it more naturally.
See, and blue doesn't really have anything like that. Blue can counter stuff, but white has stacks effects, which could make it harder for players to do anything, let alone just counter spells. Each of the colors, they have their own individual strengths, obviously, and blue's going to get you that card draw, which is going to draw you into a lot of your good black and white cards. And then, I mean, all of the different Orzhov cards and Azorius cards that you're going to be able to add into the deck. There's a lot of this spell can't be countered stuff in Azorius that you get to throw in there. Just a really powerful
You have all the board
color.
wipes in the world.
Yeah, oh, basically.
White,
I mean,
white
everything
has most of the good ones. Black has a lot of the good ones. You're in blue, so you have Supreme Verdict. And then you're also in blue, so you have Psych Rift.
I can't believe you said Supreme Verdict before you said Cyclonic Rift. That's wild. Yeah, basically, you don't get any of the red board wipes, and then green. Enough said.
So I guess maybe that's the weakness. So some of these are Reanimator commanders, but a lot of the scary Reanimator threats are green creatures. Do you feel like that's maybe the weak spot, is that you don't have the most efficient creatures, that your ramp is mostly artifact based. What do you guys think about that as maybe the weakness of the color combination?
Not when Eldrazi's exist.
Well, that's true.
So when it comes to Esper, if we had talked about this when we were first getting into Magic, I would have hated Esper. Can't stand it. All three colors annoy me, especially when they do their things together. Miserable. But as I've grown as a person, I've come to appreciate them more. Esper is the kid on the playground who always said, no, you actually can't do that. My power negates your power, so I actually win. That's what Esper is, but like unironically.
Yeah.
So kind of miserable at times, but there are a couple decks I'm actually a fan of nowadays with the color combination.
It's not my favorite personally because blue is not one of my favorite colors anymore. It used to be, but not anymore. But it is strong. It definitely is in the running for one of the strongest.
It is really funny looking at this list on EDH Rec, because it's like a list of decks that Morgan has built, a list of decks that Morgan has thought about building, a list of decks that Morgan is building. It's pretty funny. But yeah, we'll go ahead and move on to the next one, which I actually feel like is fairly similar. Next up is Grixis, which is for blue, black, red. So obviously it's pretty similar, right? It's only one of the colors that got switched out. So we're dropping white, we're going into red. So now we have some damage-based stuff. We're touching our toes into more aggressive-based stuff, combat-y stuff. Damage-based, combat stuff. Got some different kinds of creatures. Got some Spellslinger options. We got, I think all of these are going to have some tribal elements, so I'll try to ignore that on all of these lists. But, we have Nekusar, which is wheels, which is dealing damage when you wheel. You have cards that are stealing cards from your opponents. It's kind of control-y in a lot of the ways that Esper is. For me, I don't like it as much as Esper because I find that like the small amounts of damage here and there don't tend to add up to a realistic win all the time. But I have had a couple Grixis decks over the years, and they're pretty neat. So what do you guys think about Grixis?
Yeah, I think it mostly is Esper, but instead of white's protection, you have red's damage, is like mostly what that combination tends to be. So the white and the black are like doing the whole no you, just, you want to win quicker than Esper typically does. Again, I like it more than I used to when we first were in Magic, but it's still not one of my favorites.
What I like a lot about Grixis, there's just a lot of different ways to build your deck. I have an Obeka deck, and
what a weird deck.
That deck is just built around getting stuff onto the battlefield that's only going to be there for a turn, and then keeping it, and basically taking advantage of something that I was supposed to only get once, and then it would go away, but maintaining that value. And that deck is really fun because what I found is there's a lot of cards that come out that I can cycle into that deck and make work and actually can do some really cool things. And I feel that way about the color combination as a whole. Again, you think about what each color does really well on its own. Red is going to be out here dealing tons of damage to people. Blue's going to make sure that you can't be stopped in doing that damage.
There's
and
also
then, all the board wipes to keep everything in check.
Yeah, I will say that your board wipes are a little bit worse here than they are in Esper, right? Because white kind of just has the best board wipes. But, I mean, you still have your black ones, you still have your blue bounce ones, and then red obviously has like Blasphemous Act, Chain Reaction. There's a couple of Rakdos ones that are pretty good.
Real quick, can you tell me what white board wipe you think is better than Toxic Deluge?
That, I think, kind of depends. I would...
For Commander, let me specify.
So... I always prefer flexible board wipes. And Toxic Deluge has two things that a lot of board wipes don't have. Toxic Deluge is lowering your life, which in some decks matters. It does the -X thing, which, will get around Indestructible, which is sometimes relevant because not all board wipes exile. But it's efficient. It's only 3 mana, so that leaves you mana left on your turn to rebuild before the other players. So I do run Toxic Deluge a lot, But what I will say is that when I'm deciding which board wipes to add to my decks, I'm usually starting with flexible ones or catch-alls, and those are all in white. White for flexible, you have Austere Command, you have Farewell. For catch-alls, you have Hour of Revelation, you have Ondu Inversion. Like, those are the board wipes I usually start with, unless I have like some niche thing I'm trying to do, in which case I'll gravitate towards board wipes that do that thing. But even though some of those are white, so.
Yeah. White is very good with board wipes that mess with your opponent's stuff and keep what you want around.
But if we're just specifically talking creature board wipes, to me, black just does it the best. First of all, Toxic Deluge, like you said, it's only 3 mana, and in Commander you start with 40 life. Life is definitely a resource. You know, there's a bunch of other ones that don't see a lot of play, and usually because they're kind of costly as far as mana value. But Decree of Pain is...
I do really like Decree
one
of Pain.
of the best board wipes you can play in a game, because the card draw advantage that you get from that is insane.
I do like Decree of Pain. We honestly, at this point, should just have an episode where we talk about board wipes. So maybe that's something we do in the future. The last thing I will note is probably the second best, debatably, black board wipe is Damnation.
Yes.
Which is just Black Wrath of God. And if you look at other white wraths, I mean, it's a different ballpark, but like, if you, like, no one plays Wrath of God. Like, people are only playing Damnation because there just aren't that many efficient black board wipes. So I thought that was worth mentioning. But the only other thing is that if you ever want to, I'm looking just out on the Grixis commanders before we move to the next color combination. There's also some chaosy stuff if you want to go down that route. I was chaos.
Thinking that would be it's the perfect chaos colors too.
It
really is.
And then also it has, I think, the most interesting vampire commander. If you ever want to build something other than Edgar, Evelyn, the Covetous. You play vampires, except you're also stealing stuff from your opponents. It's fun. So if you ever wanted to build a fun vampire deck that wasn't Edgar, that's where I would go. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one, though. We have, this is Jund boys. We're going to be playing our Tarmogoyfs and our Lilianas. Actually, we got like Corvold, Fakehurst King, which is a sacrifice deck. You have Lord Windgrace, which is also a sacrifice deck, but it's also a land deck. You have Yurlok, which is, I kind of want to build this someday, but it brings mana burn back, you know? So you have a lot of aggressive creature strategies. You have sacrifice decks. You have land decks. What do you guys think about Jund?
I think what really makes Jund shine is green. I mean, there's a lot of decks that don't necessarily run a whole lot of green spells, but I bet you anything the green spells that are in there are along the lines of, you know, Rampant Growth, Farseek, Kodama's Reach, Cultivate, those types of cards.
Well, and then if you're in the... I mean, even just think about, like, if you want to build a creature-based deck, you're still doing land ramp stuff because you have, like, Wood Elves and Secure Tribe Elder. And Secure Tribe Elder, if you're doing a sacrifice creature deck, then feeds into that as well.
So, I mean, I think about it kind of like, think about what the Rakdos commanders look like, and then how much better they would be if you could add green to it.
Yeah.
So, the green, I think, is probably the premier color in this color pairing.
Yeah, so I feel like Jund is basically just Golgari with haste. A lot of them, a lot of the decks, which is good because we all really like Golgari. So just adding that splash of red aggro in there is a pretty fun way of making the deck a little different. And I used to have what's his name? I haven't pulled up here. The landfall commander. Yeah, Lord Windgrace. I really love that deck back when I had it back in the early days of our play group. So I'm a pretty big fan of Jund. I don't currently have one put together, but at some point I think I'm going to have to build a new one.
Most of my affinity for Jund has to do with 60 card. Like, I just like the sluggish, like, mid-range decks of early Modern. But that doesn't really translate well to Commander, because in 1v1, you can just one for one your opponents over and over again and theoretically scrape out a win. You can't really do that in Commander when you have 3 opponents. So I feel like a lot of Jund is just either land decks or sacrifice decks, a mixture of the two, creature decks. So obviously it's cool. I don't currently have a Jund deck. I used to, like I said, I used to have a Karthus deck. I have some of these cards in some of my decks, like a lot of these top commanders in Jund. I have them in the 99 of a couple of my 4 and 5 color decks. But I am personally, I'm lower on this than I am for the other color combinations we've talked about so far.
Did you get smacked by a Corvold deck, and now you just hate Jund?
No, so I meant to mention this when we were talking about Grixis. I used to have a Thraxamundar deck, so it was Grixis Sacrifice, and I was taking it apart to build a new deck because I had that for a long time. I was ready to move on, but I liked Sacrifice, and so I was like, what if I just, I took the parts I'm not using for this new Grixis deck, and I built a Corvold deck, and then as I was building it, I realized what I was doing, and I stopped. It's called self-control. So yeah, it did not happen because I was like, people will never forgive me. But speaking of creature-based decks,
wait a minute, what kind of horrible stuff were you trying to do to people with this Corvold deck?
Like Dictate of Erebos and, just, really chill, casual magic, just not let my opponents have creatures, stuff like that, just nice, fair stuff. And because Corvold's in green, I could ramp into that stuff a lot faster than I could in the Thraxamundar deck. So
you're a bad person for just thinking that.
Well, at least I stopped myself. There's 4 kinds of people, and I am the kind of person who wants to do the right thing but does it begrudgingly. All right. So So speaking of creature decks, though, next up is Naya. So this is red, green, white. Obviously, there's a lot of really awesome typal commanders here. I know I said I wasn't going to talk about them, but we got dinosaurs, we have cats, we have dogs. But really, just overall, this is just creatures galore. What Preston was saying that the last one was basically Golgari with haste. This is kind of just Selesnya with haste. It's also got a lot of token synergies. You have cards like Girid and Genie Fae, which I believe is also a cat dog option as well, but it's mostly tokens. You got +1/+1 counters. It's kind of a good, if it's Timmy's first 3-color deck, Hi. My baby came to say hi to me. But it's pretty cool. And I will say that I finally found a Naya deck I like. I built Hezazon, so it's deserts. It's a lands deck with deserts, which is really fun because I used to play back when Hour of Revelation and Amonkhet, like that was like the first or second standard rotation that I was playing Magic in. So it was like, oh, I get to just play some of these cards I haven't played in forever. So I'm really excited. I have the last of the cards coming in the mail for that one. But what do you guys think about Naya?
Honestly, it doesn't surprise me that this color combination has some of the best creatures.
Yeah, there's some gas here.
I mean, as the commanders, yes. But I just mean Zakama.
Zakama is bonkers.
Yeah. So, if you're trying to build a 3-color deck and you really, really like creatures, this is the color for you for sure. White gives you the advantages whenever creatures enter the battlefield, helps protect your creatures from stuff. Green makes your stuff bigger and huge and can swing in for a lot of damage and gives it trample, and red gives it all haste. It's all things that creatures really need to be successful, so it's no surprise that this is a creature-heavy color trio.
As I've gotten more complex with my decks over the years, Naya has fallen down, but I will always have a soft spot in my heart for Naya. It'll always, I think, have a honorary number 1 for all the 3-color options in Commander for me, just because it's so fun when you're first starting Commander to, throw down 18 giant dinosaurs or make an army of 1,000 tokens with double strike, lifelink, trample, and haste. It's just, who doesn't enjoy that? Even if you've gotten more complex over the years, I think almost everyone who plays Magic still has
slug. Yeah.
But there are some ones that are a little more interesting if you do want to change it up a little bit, like Zakama, Marisi. Like, not all of them have to be this big, dumb creature pile or like some huge token swarm. There are a couple options in here that I think are a little more interesting than people tend to give it credit for. Or like the desert deck you were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So it
Yeah.
definitely has some options.
I mean, that still feels
Rocco.
pretty Naya because it's like lands and tokens, so it's still very Naya. But yeah, I agree. Also, Ural, which is like one of the OG Voltron commanders. If you ever want to do like Timmy's first Voltron deck as well, that's also an option for you because you have a lot of really good auras in this color combination.
I mean, Atla
if you want to
Filani's
really annoy
good.
your friends, you could play Rocco as your commander and steal all of their lands. If you guys remember, I used to have that deck.
I hate you.
Mael, did we talk about Mael yet? I
Yeah,
didn't
that's a
think
pretty
so.
cool one, too.
Mael is nuts. That was like one of the first real super strong commander decks I ever played against.
So this is also lower on the tier. I've mentioned on other episodes that I'm fallen out of favor with just the big stompy green creature decks, but I will say that at least Naya has, token strategies and a couple of outliers as well as just some cool cards. So moving on, we have Bant. So this is green, white, blue. There's a really cool new one that's coming out with the new set. I already ordered the pre-con. It's a Clue token deck. I'm excited. But this is a lot of the same stuff, a lot of creature-based stuff, except now you have blue, so you're drawing an obscene amount of cards. So we have, Tulane, we have Arcades, we have, Bernard's a cool new one. We have some Enchantress ones. We have Rune, which is, the probably number one Blink commander. You're mostly playing creatures or enchantments and then drawing an obscene amount of cards. What do you guys think about Bant?
The last thing Simic needed was access to good blood wipes. That's what
Those are
Bant
one thing
is.
keeping it down was they didn't have austere command.
Simic is Simic, and now you give Simic access to white. And
That was a mistake, which is the best support color, as we've said many a times.
You can have fun
No one
with
can-
Bant, but it's very easy for it to become annoying for the other three players.
no one can now counter your expropriate because you because you have Grand Abolisher on the battlefield.
Yeah, and because Bant tends to lean
and
towards
by the
creatures, you
way-
can find your Grand Abolisher really easy.
And by the way, you found that Grand Abolisher with a Worldly Tutor and then made him a 20/20.
And you found the Worldly Tutor with your Sylvan Tutor because you're in blue as well. So
No,
Yeah,
you drew it. You drew it when you picked it from cards shown to you by your Sylvan library.
yeah, I will say I have a Rune deck, and I feel like Rune's not that bad because it's. I mean, the 99's, kind of a Simic shell with some white creatures and board wipes and stuff. But Rune itself as a commander is pretty fair. It came out in the early days of the format. It's kind of been power crept. But if you just want to play good Blink stuff, it's still a pretty fun deck. And then Steven just built Tommy the Arcades deck for the Christmas episode, which was a lot of fun. I used to have an Arcades deck and took it apart because it was actually too strong.
Arcades.
There's
is cool.
definitely cool stuff, but
This color combination literally lets you tutor for every type of spell in the game,
yeah.
and you're not playing black.
Yeah, yeah. Most you have to play black if you want the specific tutors, but now you are like all the stuff you would like the specific tutors. You now just have access to all of them. I've never done that, but you're right, Preston. You can do that. Shall we move on to the next one? We have Abzan. Oh yeah, this is hitting me real good in the soul. So Abzan, this is white, black, green, which is maybe my favorite. If I want to go back to my roots, this is my color combination. My modern deck is Abzan. I'm thinking about building a Pioneer deck. It's going to be Abzan, mostly because I already have the parts for it. I've had a couple Abzan commander decks over the years. When we did custom commanders, I basically did an Abzan version of Rune. And then the next episode, I don't know if it's the next one that's coming out when you're seeing this. I guess it's not. But the next episode we're filming for Upkeep. We're all playing Jason's decks, and I'm playing his Miracle deck. I really like this color combination. So it's Golgari, but now you have the support of white. There's some sacrifice stuff, there's some creature stuff, there's some land stuff, but there's some sneaky like life gain stuff you can do. There's a couple cool enchantment builds. There's some poison infecty kind of things. It's mostly creature stuff. But if you're going to build like my humans deck is also, my human typal deck is also Abzan. It's mostly creature-based stuff, but there's a couple outliers in there as well. For me personally, if I'm just building a creature-based deck specifically, this is at the top. It's near the top, at the top, somewhere in there.
So for me, I haven't had a long history with Abzan, but recently in the past maybe 5, 6 months or so, it's really started to become appealing to me because, it's got that green white core that I've always loved, but black, lets you, use your graveyard if people are mean and blow up your board.
Also
Oh
So
yes,
gives you
how
yeah,
dare them?
it's
it also gives you access to the best tutors in the game.
I don't care about tutors. I don't like tutors in Commander.
I'm not just talking about you, Preston. I'm talking about the color combination itself.
Oh,
You
I know.
take you take
Your deck is objectively stronger to run Vampiric and Demonic Tutor, but
They're boring.
yeah, it makes your deck a little too consistent. I feel like we could also probably do an episode about that. Maybe add that to our episode ideas. We're going to do a board wipe episode. We're going to do a tutor episode. That's actually probably a good idea. Jason,
there's
do you
a
have
lot
more
of
to add?
really cool abilities that you get with Abzan. I
Yeah.
mean, my miracle deck, it's kind of a creatures deck, but it's kind of an enchantment deck. It goes both ways in that regard. Teneb the Harvester, it's a really cool card, and it's a really fun commander to build around because it's very graveyard heavy. You swing, do damage, you pay 3, you pull a creature back from your graveyard to the battlefield. You could do that as a dragon themed deck. One thing that we haven't really talked about a whole lot is the different partner commanders that can make up this color combination. So you have like Kodama of the East Tree, and then like Timna.
Stop. Yes, you can do that, Jason. But
There's a lot of fun stuff that you can do in these color combinations. My Miracle deck is really strong. It's one of my stronger decks. I have so much fun playing with it.
yeah, so my human typal deck is Abzan, and I actually do have a partner pair for that. I have Ravo Soul Tender, so it gives my creatures a slight buff. It has flying, so it's a little bit of an evasive hitter, and then it lets me get stuff back from my graveyard later in the game. And then I also have its partner with Kamal, so that I can have a finisher in the deck because, as it turns out, humans are puny. So you want to make sure you have a way to finish the game. It's also probably objectively one of the stronger ones because as we've said 1,000 times on the channel, white is maybe the best support color. Green is probably the strongest color in the game for more casual sided commander because you're ramping, you have big creatures, and then black can do a lot of stuff. Black it's strong with the acknowledgement that you're using your life as a resource a lot of the times, or you're sacrificing stuff, which you're usually okay with doing. So also objectively, I think Abzan, as far as like power level for the 3 color pairs, it's also probably pretty high on the list if we're just talking like objective power.
One of the stronger ones for sure. Definitely in the running for strongest.
So something I wanted to point out is Naya is probably the color combination that's the most board present, but Abzan is probably second place, but it has that graveyard recursion, which makes it so much stronger and usually a lot more interesting for people.
Yeah. Next up is Jeskai. So this is blue, red, white. This is often a Spellslinger. If you look at a lot of the top commanders, it's Spellslinger, cycling. There's some token commanders. There's some cycling. I already said cycling. A lot of stuff like that. There's a couple chaosy, donate-y kind of commanders, but a lot of it's Spellslinger. I feel like correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but I feel like we're all fairly low on this because all of us, when we did the 2-color ranking, we were both pretty low on Azorius and Izzet. And I feel like that's kind of what this is.
Yeah, that was my 8th and 10th least favorite of the 10.
I was pretty high on Izzet, not high on Azorius, but I have a couple of Izzet decks, so I had it higher than you guys did. Yeah, Jeskai is not the most exciting or intriguing. I mean, to me, probably the most fun Jeskai deck to play is the cycling commander from the precon, the cycling precon.
Specifically, I like the backup commander, which is Bralin and Shabraz, which Steven has a commander deck of, which he's played a couple times on the show. I really like that. Aowen is a very good human commander. Kasla is really cool if you ever want to build a Convoke deck, but it's like you shouldn't build a Convoke deck. And then I've tried. I used to have a Kaikar deck, which was Spellslinger, and then the creatures you would make with Kaikar from Spellslinging, you would win the game. And I tried to build it pretty fair. And that's the other thing too, is a lot of these Spellslinger kind of commanders, even if you try building them the fair way, they just accidentally kind of storm off a bit and get a lot of value. And then even if you don't have the win anywhere in sight, you're just going to paint a big target on your back. So I've almost built Narset and Light and Exiled, the new Narset, a couple times. And I don't know if I'm going to. I feel like it would kind of do the same thing. So, yeah, I'm fairly low on it. There's definitely a couple cool commanders in here, or like Commodore Guff, which Jason's played on the show before. There's definitely some cool commanders in here, but I feel like a lot of it's the Spellslinger kind of stuff.
I'll say this about that. I'll say this about that. Do you know how many times I've played that deck since I played it on Upkeep?
Have you? Really? Yeah.
It's still unsleeved. I took the sleeves off it.
Yeah. So that's how we feel about that one. Moving on.
I was gonna say my favorite. Just real
ahead.
quick. I was gonna say my favorite is Pramicon Sky Rampart, just because it's really dumb.
I lost my list. So next up is one that I think we're all going to have a very different opinion on. This is Sultai. So this is black, green, blue. If you are a flicker kind of guy, you have Yarok, which is one of the better options for flicker commanders. Tetsunari is a really interesting enchantment commander. And then there's a ton of sick graveyard decks. There's Muldrotha, which is one of my personal favorite commander decks I've ever had. Sidisi is really sick. The Mimoplasm's an all-star favorite classic commander. And then there's some, weird kind of offshoot stuff. There's like Nine Fingers, which cares about gates. There's Kadena, which is the morph commander. There's Jorn, which is the snow permanence matters deck. There's a lot of really cool commanders in here. A lot of them have to do with graveyard recursion and stuff like that. But I like this color combination quite a bit. What do you guys think about Sultai?
I'm going to go ahead and say that I think Sultai is the strongest 3-color pairing out there. Because what is the one thing that you really could do just to make Simic as strong as it could possibly be?
Let it replay all of its stuff from the graveyard?
Give it all the best tutors so it can go find its combo pieces. And
That's
just
true.
put them into your hand and then play them on the next turn. And now you've won the game. So I think Sultai is the strongest of all of them personally, just because of that aspect alone. But there's a lot of really, really cool and interesting Sultai commanders. I built the Zaxara deck, the Hydra's deck.
Yep.
And that, you don't even need to build it as a Hydra's deck because
Just
it's so
X mana
strong.
spells.
Because
Yeah.
it's Sultai. You just have to put, what's that enchantment that you pay 1 mana to untap enchanted creature?
I don't remember the name of it, but
There's
insane.
an aura enchantment out there that you just enchant Zaxara with, and then you tap Zaxara for 2, use one of them to untap Zaxara. Hey,
You just make
look at
infinite
that!
mana.
Infinite mana!
Oops, I tripped.
That's exactly
Comboed with
right.
myself.
We always say that Simic is like, it's so good that you trip and fall and you land on an infinite combo. In Sultai, it's like you trip, fall, and you are caught and saved by the CEO of an infinite combo company, and he brings you to his facility and then gives you the keys to the whole shop, and now you're the CEO of the combo factory. To me, that's Sultai. When you add black to Simic, it's just ridiculous. And then black also has the ability to just completely clear away everyone's board and, your Simic, so you can rebuild pretty quickly because you have twice as many lands as everybody else does.
I will say you're not having white is the only thing that would say that like maybe Abzan is stronger, just because white has such good board wipes. White has such flexible removal. White has protection. But the upside here is, well, you can just hold up 2 mana for counterspell. Or, if your commander's in play, you can just, I'm tapped out. Ooh, never mind, Fierce Guardianship. So there is that as well. But Preston, what do you think about Sultai?
Yeah, so I used to have like a Varash the Hunter deck, so I have a
Yeah.
little bit of love for Sultai, but it is probably one of my lower options. I definitely think it's maybe the most Morgan color pairing or color option out there. Like you used to really dig Sultai commanders back in the day.
Yeah, I mean, my Muldrotha deck was one of the first commander decks I built. Next up, we have Mardu. So this is red, white, black, and this is kill, attack, kill, attack, kill, attack in a nutshell. Because you have, you're in the three best board wipe colors. You're in the best targeted removal colors, and you have a lot of really aggressive creatures and some
And
decent
you're
ways to get stuff back. Kalia of the Vast is, one of the all-time classic commanders. You have East and Two Heavens as one, which is apparently the number one Mardu commander, even though it's fairly new. Typal, you have Edgar Markov, which is by far the most popular vampire commander. And then there's just a ton of stuff on here that cares about doing damage and attacking. So it's, yeah, what do you guys think about Mardu?
Mardu sees the fact that a game of Commander starts with 160 life on the battlefield and is annoyed and offended by that fact, and will do everything it possibly can to make four big fat goose eggs.
one thing that I think that often gets forgotten about with white is that it is the best color at protecting your own stuff. I mean, we talk about all the good things that white does to balance out the board. White is the best color by far at keeping your opponents from affecting your game plan. Now, it's not like counterspells and things like that, but it's silence. It's Angel's Grace. It's those your opponents can't cast spells during your turn effects. It's
Avacyn.
non-creature spells cost 2 more to cast. All your permanents are indestructible. White is the best at doing those things.
Which goes well in an aggro strategy because
Exactly.
now your 1/1s and your 2/2s feel a lot better when you're less scared about them dying.
Exactly. You don't have to worry about losing this stuff that you're getting out and being super aggressive with swinging. You don't have to worry about losing it necessarily because you could even cast something, a card like Make a Stand, where all your creatures get +1/+0 and indestructible, and that's 2 mana. So that I think is what white adds the most to any deck whenever it gets put in. Is just that level of protection. You don't even necessarily need to use it as a way to get rid of your opponent's stuff so much as you can use it to build a bubble around you. That way you can build your game plan and not have to worry about things getting just taken off the board and having to rebuild.
Speaking of rebuilding, I will say that, the Simic colors, which are the colors that are missing, what we make up for in protection and removal, we're lacking in card draw a lot of the times.
Although not always. Not always, because red has a decent amount of draw stuff, whether it's rummaging
It has like
or
looting and rummaging and
impulse
reckless
draws,
impulse kind
stuff
of
like
effects.
that.
Yeah.
But black also does a really good job of drawing you cards. I mean, you think about cards like Necropotence or Phyrexian Arena or Village Rites. Tevish Sot draws you cards with his +1 or +2 ability, I think. So black is...
But you get a lot less of the explosive card draw.
Right, you're not getting necessarily the heuristic studies that can draw you 4 cards per turn.
Or the rich cards expertises or stuff like that.
Yeah. But there's ways to do it. I think white probably is the worst of those 3 at drawing you cards. But what white lacks in card draw, it makes up for in... I want to say mana ramp, but not really, because it's getting lands equal to the difference between you and an opponent. That's typically how white does it. Or white makes you treasure tokens, and that balances the mana out that way.
I was gonna say that obviously that mana fixing is a little tougher in this color combination with not having green, but white also has catch up ramp. So if you just you run out your Knight of the White Orchid before you play your land, that's kind of ramp.
Or your Cartographer's Hawk. Cartographer's Hawk is a card that a lot of people sleep on. Or, Weathered Wayfarer. Weathered Wayfarer is a fantastic option.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I actually don't have a Mardu deck right now, and I don't know if I could see myself building another one of these because even though that some of these are commanders that I think look really sweet, it's like, well, I either have or have had decks similar to that before, so is it worth building? So I'm not sure. We'll see.
Yeah, this is probably my overall lowest ranked of the three color pair combinations. I'm just not super interested in what these colors tend to do together.
Tommy would throw down with you so hard. He's, building that Edgar deck. He's got Ishan. He'd
This is
throw
probably
down
his
with you.
favorite.
It might be.
Yeah.
He likes the attacky combat damage kind of decks. So, all right. So our last one, talk about Simic splashing a color. We have for our last one, Teamer. So this is green, blue, red. I actually have the number one commander of this color pair, which is Miram Sentinel Worm. So it's dragons, and you make copies of your dragons. And really, Teamer is just kind of that kind of crap. There's a couple chaos ones. There's a couple typal ones. There's a chaos, typal, chaos. What was the other one I was going to say? I don't remember. But a lot of it is just play big spells. You have your Mirams and you have your Maelstrom Wanderers, Sirach, which I think is a very underrated card. It's Simic splashing red, so you can play Blasphemous Act. What do you guys think of Teamer?
I view it more as Izzet gets green.
Really? Okay.
That's really how I see it because and this kind of is just a personal opinion
So you're
type of thing because
thinking of it as more as like the Calamaxes and stuff like that, like it's Spellslinger, but now you can fix your mana.
So I think Izzet is really getting a benefit from green here more than because red is probably the weakest color of all 5 colors. And I don't think adding that to Simic necessarily makes it a ton better, except now your combo pieces have haste. If they're creatures, which in Simic, a lot of the times they are.
And then, Preston, you have a little bit of experience with this color combination because you have a Animar Tiny Leaders deck, and you used to have a Balloona deck. What do you think about this color combo?
Well, I wanted to point out it's very funny you two point out either Simic plus red or is it plus green
Yes,
because
very
they
opposite
literally
ends of the spectrum.
that's literally one of the options here is Riku of Two Reflections, which is both of those ideas at the same time.
Yeah.
So it literally is both of those. But I like this color combination a lot. I have Animar on Commander on or
Magic
MTGO.
Online. Mm-hmm.
Yep, it's Animar with every single creature in the deck being colorless. So that's a very fun deck. People hate it when they see it, understandably.
Cursing you out on the
But
Magic Online chat.
oh yeah, people have blocked me for playing Animar on there. So it's not my favorite, but there are definitely some of the commanders on here I'm fond of. I did like Balloona when I played it. It didn't work as much as I wanted it to, but it was still pretty fun. I have the Swarmlord deck. I don't have it together right now, but that one was really fun. I played a game or two with it, so I do like this one.
I don't.
It's very much a.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say it's very much either I have won the game or I am now out of the game for the rest of the time, which I don't love. But when you do win, you win big.
Yeah. I do play some of these cards in some of my decks, more of the chaosy ones, and like I said, Miram. Like red is the best color for dragons, and then you have Miram in there, so now it's like, well, now I have the Simic degenerate stuff that I can add to do that. So it's definitely cool. I would say that like if you're Timmy's first deck, we said is Naya. Timmy's second deck, when he's ready for a smidge more complexity, is to jump into Teamer. I would say overall it's lower on my list of ones that of like 3 color combinations I like. But
I actually used to have a Xyrus. I don't know if I said that right. Xyrus, the Withering Storm. The one where whenever an opponent draws a card, except for the first one, you make a snake.
oh yeah,
That was a wheel deck. And I gotta tell you, it was really fun.
It was really fun.
It was a really fun.
You're the
Can we kick
worst.
him off the podcast?
No, we have to have
Not
someone
on
here to
your
talk.
life, because I
We have to
edit
have
it.
someone here to defend tutors when we do that episode.
No, that's true.
Also, I edit the podcast, son.
Yeah.
You don't have to be on it to do that.
If I'm not on it, what makes you think I'm gonna edit it?
That's fair.
So
Not
Before we-
every episode of End Step that I've not been in that I have edited. That wouldn't make that shouldn't make you think I'd do it. Not at all.
yeah. Such is the world of content creation. It's a fickle beast. Before we go, I wanted to ask what you guys think about 3-color decks in general. Like, why go up from 2-color? Because 2 colors, you got some flexibility, but you have some consistency. What do you think are some of the ups and downs of wanting to go into a 3-color deck?
To me, 3-color commanders are what commanders should be. Not that there's anything wrong with monocolored commanders or dual color commanders, but I think for a format that has 99 cards in the deck and then you have one commander that kind of is the captain of the ship there, you having access to the different options of 3 different colors, that to me is more in the commander spirit than monocolor or dual color like guilt or anything like that.
I like 3-color a lot as a concept. I just don't find myself building a lot of the commanders overall. I want to build more. It's just I feel like I connect with a lot of the 2-color specifically more often. But when I do find a 3-color I do tend to like them quite a bit.
One other thing I really want to highlight about 3-color commanders is the more popular that 3-color commanders are, the more 3-color commander precons that we'll get, which means the more reprints that we'll get for commander staples that are really important in each of those individual
I hope
colors.
so, man. I hope so. Yeah, because we also... It's kind of offensive that they don't reprint the triomes. They need to reprint those because those are like...
Why is that not a thing that's happened? I don't get
know.
it.
So that they can reprint them in a expensive thing and make us spend more money on it that way instead of reprinting a standard into a commander precon, even though that they literally go in all 3-color decks, or they should. So that's actually my biggest downside to 3-color decks, is if you're not playing green. Because if you're playing green, right, it's fine because you can play a lot of the Rampant Growths, Cultivates, Kodama's Reaches, cards like that are going to not only ramp you, of course, but they're going to fix your mana, so you can get away with like playing a lot of basics. Whereas if you're not playing green, you probably have to play more dual lands, which is either going to slow you down a bit and or cost more money because you have to buy better dual lands. So I would say that that's a downside to keep in mind. But I do really like 3-color decks. I have 24 commander decks, I think. I would bet half of them almost are 3-color decks because 3-color is like this really nice sweet spot where you can't literally do everything like a 5-color deck can do, but you can do almost everything, and you're going to have some pretty decent consistency still. And I feel like 3-color is the most colors you can have while still having a somewhat cohesive color identity. Like there, you could say like Sultai
letting each color do something.
Yeah. So I feel like when you go into we've talked about this before, when you go into the 4 or 5 color decks, color identity kind of goes out the window for the most part. I feel like 3, you can still kind of do everything, but there's still a little bit of a cohesion to color identity. Well, guys, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We went a little long, but if you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments. And then we will be back next week to talk about our favorite cards from Murders at Karlov Manor. And then make sure you're subscribed so that you can see that and our gameplay, which is coming out next. I believe the episode after this is we're all playing artifact decks. Very sweet. And we will see you guys next time. Bye.